There is a plant that produces more protein per acre than any crop on Earth. It doubles its mass every 24 hours. It requires no soil, no tractors, no fertilizer. NASA selected it for feeding astronauts on Mars, and the agricultural industry has declared war on it. They call it a weed, a nuisance, an invasive pest that must be poisoned out of existence. They sell herbicides specifically designed to destroy it. They publish bulletins warning farmers to kill it on sight. They have convinced an entire generation that this protein-rich superfood is worthless. This plant contains up to 45% protein by dry weight. That is more than soybeans, more than eggs. It rivals beef without slaughtering a single animal. For centuries, civilizations across Asia survived on it. Today, most Americans have never heard its name. This is the story of duckweed, the smallest flowering plant on Earth and the most dangerous crop the food industry has ever tried to bury. Welcome to Traditional Harvest. Before we open this vault, if these stories matter to you, the best way to preserve this wisdom is simple. Subscribe, hit the bell, and share these vaults with those who need to remember what we forgot. The archive opens in the still waters of Southeast Asia, where people have harvested this plant for centuries. In Thailand, they call it Kai Nam, meaning water eggs. In Laos and Myanmar, families have passed down recipes for generations. They scoop it from ponds, toss it into soups, fold it into omelets, deep fry it into crispy snacks. The smallest vegetable, the most nutritious green they know. Duckweed is not one plant, but a family including Limna, Spirodela, and Wolffia. The tiniest species, Wolffia globosa, produces the smallest flower and fruit on Earth. A single frond is barely the size of a pinhead, yet that speck of green contains a nutritional profile that humbles crops bred for thousands of years. The Chinese knew its power 2,000 years ago. They called it Fu Ping and used it in traditional medicine. Ancient healers prized its cooling properties and they prescribed it for fevers, skin eruptions, and the early stages of influenza. The Babylonian Talmud mentions it. Greek botanist Theophrastus wrote about it in the 4th century BCE. The Maya civilization incorporated it into medicinal incantations. Across oceans and centuries, cultures discovered the same plant and reached the same conclusion. This tiny green speck sustains life. Now consider what modern science has confirmed. Duckweed protein content ranges from 20% to 45% of dry weight. Under optimal conditions, some species match the protein concentration of meat. The amino acid profile is complete. Every essential amino acid the human body requires is present, including lysine, methionine, and tryptophan, the building blocks of muscle, immune function, and cognitive health. But protein is only the beginning. Duckweed contains more iron than spinach, more zinc than kale, and more potassium than any other green vegetable. It also provides calcium, magnesium, and B vitamins, including the rare plant-based vitamin B12. It produces antioxidants like zeaxanthin and lutein that protect your eyes and fight inflammation. It is, pound for pound, one of the most nutrient-dense foods ever discovered. And here is where the numbers become staggering. Duckweed is the fastest-growing flowering plant on Earth. Under ideal conditions, it doubles its biomass in 24 to 48 hours. One day to double. Compare that to corn, which takes an entire growing season. Compare that to cattle, which require 2 years to reach slaughter weight. Duckweed operates on a different timeline, a timeline industrial agriculture cannot comprehend. The yield per acre is almost impossible to believe. Rutgers University researchers calculated that optimized duckweed farming could produce 1.4 million pounds of dry biomass per hectare per year. That is 50 times the yield of corn. A single acre of duckweed can produce 10 to 20 tons of protein-rich biomass per year. Soybeans yield roughly 1 ton of protein per acre. Duckweed produces 10 to 20 times more protein. NASA noticed, when planning for long-duration space missions, scientists needed a crop that could grow fast, require minimal resources, and provide maximum nutrition in tight quarters. They tested lettuce, wheat, and potatoes. Then they found duckweed. The Translational Research Institute for Space Health commissioned research. The University of Colorado studied it. In November 2023, duckweed was launched to the International Space Station aboard SpaceX. It was the first space mission involving this ancient food. NASA identified it as a top candidate for Martian food production. Astronauts on future missions may survive on duckweed salads, duckweed soups, or duckweed omelets. The food of the future floats on pond water. But there is something else NASA discovered. Duckweed's antioxidants help combat the effects of cosmic radiation. Zeaxanthin and lutein reduce inflammation and support eye health. These are critical concerns for astronauts exposed to solar radiation for months at a time. This tiny plant does not just feed, it protects. So ask the question. If duckweed produces more protein than soybeans, rivals beef without the methane, requires 90% less water than alfalfa, absorbs carbon instead of emitting it, purifies wastewater as it grows, needs no soil, no pesticides, no genetic modification, why are we not eating it? The answer lives in pond management catalogs across America. Search the internet for duckweed. The first results are not recipes. They are herbicide recommendations and aquatic weed control guides, instructions for how to kill it. Product names appear like Duckweed Destroyer, Wipeout, Knockdown Defense. Chemical arsenals are deployed against a plant that feeds people. Diquat dibromide, fluoridone, flumioxazin, carfentrazone, panoxalam. An entire pharmacopoeia of poisons engineered specifically to prevent duckweed from growing. Texas A&M publishes control guides. Pond supply companies sell chemical cocktails. Forums discuss treatment schedules. The industry consensus is unanimous. Duckweed is a pest that must be eliminated. The language is revealing. Invasive, nuisance, aggressive, problem weed. They describe its rapid growth as a threat. They warn that it can cover an entire pond surface in days. They caution that it blocks sunlight and depletes oxygen. They frame abundance as a crisis requiring chemical intervention. Consider what they are actually describing. A plant that grows without permission, that spreads without purchase orders, that produces food without supply chains, that feeds without profit margins. Duckweed cannot be patented. It has existed for millions of years. It reproduces vegetatively. Pull a handful from any pond and you have unlimited seed stock forever. No annual purchases, no licensing fees, no corporate dependency. Plant it once and harvest forever. You cannot sell fertilizer for a crop that thrives on wastewater. You cannot sell pesticides for a plant with no significant pests. You cannot sell specialized equipment for a harvest done by hand with a simple net. You cannot build a supply chain around something that supplies itself. The entire economic model of industrial agriculture requires crops that need constant inputs. Seeds must be purchased annually. Fertilizers must be applied seasonally. Herbicides must be sprayed perpetually. Duckweed requires none of it. And that makes it dangerous, so they called it a weed. They convinced homeowners that pond surfaces should be clear, not green. They taught farmers to see protein-rich biomass as an invasive threat. They created an industry around its destruction while the world searches desperately for sustainable protein sources. The pattern is familiar. Indigenous crops that enable food sovereignty are systematically suppressed. Not because they fail, but because they succeed without chains. Amaranth was banned by conquistadors. Quinoa was dismissed for centuries. Native corn varieties were replaced by patented hybrids. The sunchoke, the chufa, the tepary bean erase not by inadequacy, but by independence. Duckweed survives the same treatment by being unkillable. Any fragment regenerates. Any pond becomes a farm. Any gardener with a bucket and sunlight can produce more protein per square foot than industrial operations using millions of dollars in equipment. The knowledge persists in Thailand's wet markets where Kai Nam still sells. It is found in Israeli cultivation facilities where duckweed grows for human consumption. It lives in Rutgers University's collection, the largest in the world, preserving 37 species from every continent. It is present in startup companies developing protein powders, meat alternatives, and nutritional supplements. And it is studied in NASA's research facilities preparing for journeys to Mars. The European Food Safety Authority authorized duckweed protein concentrate as a novel food in April 2024. A private company now sells it legally in European markets. The US FDA has granted generally recognized as safe status to certain duckweed products. Yet the same plant is called a dangerous invasive weed by pond supply stores. Meanwhile, climate change accelerates. Droughts intensify. Aquifers deplete. The crops feeding 8 billion people were bred for a stability that no longer exists. Corn requires irrigation. Wheat requires fertile soil. Cattle require 1,800 gallons of water per pound of meat. The mathematics of survival are shifting. Duckweed was built for chaos. It grows in wastewater. It thrives in nutrient runoff that would kill other crops. It produces food in abandoned quarries, agricultural lagoons, urban rooftops. It requires no arable land, no competition with existing farms, no deforestation. You can stack it vertically in warehouses, grow it in basements, harvest it from balconies. One researcher calculated that a single square meter of duckweed production in your home could significantly supplement your daily protein needs. 8 trays, a few LED lights, water. That is the infrastructure for protein independence. No supply chain, no corporation, no permission required. The pond supply industry sells Duckweed Destroyer, the same plant NASA calls humanity's best hope for feeding astronauts across the solar system. The same plant that produces 20 times more protein per acre than soybeans. The same plant that civilizations consumed for millennia before the herbicide industry existed. They taught us to poison our abundance. They convinced us that the green film on still water was worthless, a nuisance to be chemically eliminated rather than harvested and eaten. But knowledge does not die. Every pond that goes untreated becomes a protein farm waiting to be recognized. Every gardener who lets duckweed grow instead of killing it preserves food sovereignty. Every person who learns that this weed contains more protein than beef becomes harder to control. The World Health Organization has recommended duckweed as a nutritious food source. Research institutions worldwide are studying it for sustainable agriculture. Vertical farming companies are scaling production. What the pond management industry calls invasive, the scientific community calls revolutionary. We did not lose duckweed, we were taught to destroy it. But the teaching is failing. The knowledge resurfaces in Thai kitchens and NASA laboratories, in European regulatory approvals and American research universities, in every still pond where green specks multiply without permission, producing protein while we sleep. The smallest plant, the biggest secret, hidden in plain sight on every quiet body of water across the planet. They told you to kill it. They were wrong. If this vault opens something for you, subscribe to Traditional Harvest and hit the bell. Every like and every share helps preserve this wisdom. The next vault opens soon.